"You can't stop this chairlift, Mr. Peterson. The board's decision is final." Those were the exact words HOA President Diane Reynolds shouted at me while standing in my front yard, as a young couple smiled down from the chairlift passing directly over my roof. She thought her power was absolute, but she didn't know who she was dealing with: a retired audio engineer with the skills to make their $1 million investment worthless. How did I turn a nightmare into the most feared chairlift in America? That's what I'm about to tell you. I'm Robert Peterson. After 35 years creating sound effects for Hollywood's biggest action films, I retired in 2020 with 2 Academy Award nominations and enough savings to buy my dream property, a timber cabin in Pine Ridge Estates, Colorado. This wasn't just any cabin. It was crafted from hand-hewn Douglas fir, set on 3 pristine acres with unobstructed views of Mount Wilson. The stone fireplace took a master mason 6 weeks to build. The custom windows were positioned to capture perfect light at sunrise. I'd spent decades in soundproof studios making other people's visions come to life. Now I finally had my own piece of quiet perfection. My wife Sarah, who'd stuck with me through countless late nights and stressful deadlines, fell in love with the extensive garden beds. Her rheumatoid arthritis had worsened over the years, making gardening in raised beds her therapy and joy. "This is where I'll heal," she told me the day we moved in. The community seemed ideal, a mix of retirees and vacation homeowners who valued peace and natural beauty. The HOA was initially reasonable, focused on road maintenance and preserving the rustic aesthetic. I read every word of the covenants, examined every clause. There was nothing about future development rights or airspace easements. Nothing that suggested our sanctuary could be invaded. For the first 2 years, we lived our dream. I built a workshop where I restored vintage audio equipment. Sarah's garden flourished. We hosted our adult children for holidays in a home we were proud of. We'd earned this peace after a lifetime of work. The trouble started when Diane Reynolds moved in. A former resort developer from Aspen, she quickly maneuvered onto the HOA board, bringing with her ideas about modernizing Pine Ridge. Within 6 months, she was president. I first noticed something was wrong when I returned from visiting my sick brother in Denver. Survey stakes with orange flagging tape cut a diagonal line across my property. No notice, no letter explaining their purpose, just strangers who had accessed my land while I was away. At the HOA office, Diane's assistant seemed uncomfortable when I asked about the stakes. "You'll need to speak with Mrs. Reynolds directly," she said, avoiding eye contact. When Diane finally called me back 3 days later, her tone was dismissively cheerful. "It's just preliminary planning for our winter recreation enhancement," she said. "Nothing to worry about at this stage." But I did worry, especially when construction equipment began arriving at the community lodge. Massive concrete forms, steel cables, and mechanical components were unloaded daily. When I asked one of the workers what was happening, he said, "Chairlift installation. Supposed to be finished before the first snow." The bombshell dropped during an informational meeting, scheduled on a Tuesday morning when most homeowners were at work. I rearranged a doctor's appointment to attend and found only 8 residents present in a community of 70 homes. Diane unveiled architectural renderings of Pine Ridge's exciting new amenity, a chairlift connecting the north ridge to the south slope, cutting directly through the center of the community. And there was my cabin, right in the path with the lift passing directly overhead. "This will increase winter accessibility and property values," Diane announced, as if reading from a sales brochure. "The board has unanimously approved the project." When I raised my hand to object, Diane acknowledged me with a tight smile. "Yes, Mr. Peterson? This crosses directly over my home," I said. "I never received any notification. There's nothing in the covenants about this kind of development." She slid a document across the table. Section 37, Paragraph C grants easement rights for community improvements. And notification letters were sent in April. Her smile never reached her eyes. "Perhaps you should check your mail more carefully." I knew there had been no letter. I also knew that Paragraph C had been added during last year's administrative update that homeowners were told was merely clarifying existing language. As I left the meeting, my neighbor Tom Andrews, a retired judge, pulled me aside. "This isn't right," he whispered. "She's running this place like her personal fiefdom. But be careful, she's connected. Her husband's firm is doing the construction, and her brother sits on the county commission." I didn't waste time. The next morning, I contacted James Wilson, one of Colorado's top property rights attorneys. After reviewing my documents, his assessment was grim. "They've exploited a legal gray area," he explained. "The easement language is vague enough to be interpreted broadly, and courts tend to favor HOAs in development disputes, especially when they can argue it benefits the majority of residents. We filed an emergency injunction anyway, requesting a temporary halt to construction until proper impact studies could be conducted." The judge, a golfing buddy of Diane's brother, I later learned, denied it within 48 hours. His ruling stated that since the structure wouldn't physically touch my property, imminent irreparable harm couldn't be established. Meanwhile, construction accelerated. Concrete pads for support towers were poured overnight. Steel spans arrived on flatbed trucks. Workers began clearing trees along the lift path, including 200-year-old blue spruces at the edge of my property line, trees that had been part of our view and privacy screen. I filed complaints with the county building department about work being done outside permitted hours and potential environmental impacts. Inspectors would schedule visits but mysteriously cancel at the last minute. One honest building official pulled me aside after his supervisor overruled his citations. "I can't help you officially," he said, looking over his shoulder. "But check the permit applications. There are discrepancies between what was approved and what's being built." He was right. The approved plans showed the lift path maintaining a 50-foot minimum clearance from all structures. The actual construction had towers positioned to create a path directly over my cabin with barely 20 feet of clearance, close enough for passengers to see into our bedroom skylight. Armed with this evidence, I returned to court, only to have my case assigned to the same judge who denied our injunction. He dismissed the discrepancies as minor modifications within the scope of the approved project. At every turn, I hit walls. The county commissioner recused himself from hearing appeals due to personal connections, but ensured the case went to commissioners sympathetic to development. The state regulatory board responsible for lift safety focused only on technical specifications, not placement or privacy concerns. Even the media wasn't interested. The local paper's owner had recently joined Pine Ridge's golf club, where Diane's husband was on the board. My calls to regional news outlets went unreturned or resulted in brief, dismissive conversations about typical HOA disputes. I was burning through savings on legal fees with nothing to show for it. Sarah's health deteriorated as stress exacerbated her arthritis. One night, finding her sobbing in the garden she could no longer tend because of constant worker presence, I knew something had to change. "They've got the system locked up," I told her. But systems aren't the only way to fight. On an unseasonably warm October morning, I was splitting firewood when the distinctive rumble of Diane's Range Rover approached. She parked at the edge of my driveway, emerging in a tailored black suit that seemed deliberately chosen to contrast with my flannel shirt and work jeans. Behind her, a young couple, the Millers from the North Ridge, approached on the newly completed chairlift, testing the system before its official opening. They waved cheerfully, clearly delighted with their elevated view of a property they had no right to look down upon. "Mr. Peterson," Diane called, striding toward me with the confidence of someone unused to hearing the word no. "I thought we should discuss the finishing touches before next week's grand opening." I set down my axe and crossed my arms. "There's nothing to discuss. This chairlift shouldn't be here." She gestured dismissively toward the lift. "It's already here, and it's going to transform our community." "It's transformed my home into a fishbowl," I countered. "People will be looking directly into our bedroom, our living room." "Progress always has minor inconveniences," she interrupted. "But the board has approved an attractive compensation package." She extended a manila envelope. "Landscaping credits, complimentary lift passes, and a very generous adjustment to your HOA fees." I didn't touch the envelope. "I don't want compensation. I want my privacy and peace back." "That's no longer an option." Her smile disappeared. The decision is final. The lift opens next Saturday. Above us, the miller's chair creaked slowly past, their faces uncomfortable now as they witnessed our confrontation. You can't just run roughshod over people's lives, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. There are proper procedures, impact studies, all completed and approved. She cut in. Perhaps if you'd attend more meetings instead of hiding in your workshop, you'd understand how community development works. That's when something in me snapped. 35 years of professional restraint, of keeping calm on chaotic film sets, of meeting impossible deadlines without complaint, evaporated in an instant. This isn't development, I shouted, gesturing at the chairlift overhead. This is invasion. That's my home you've violated, not some line item in your development plan. Her expression hardened. I understand change is difficult for people of your generation, but Pine Ridge is evolving. Those who can't adapt should consider whether this community still suits their needs. The threat was unmistakable. Get on board or get out. This conversation is over, she said, turning to leave. The lift opens Saturday. I suggest you use the compensation to invest in some decent curtains. As she walked away, I called after her. This isn't over, Diane. Not by a long shot. She paused, glancing back with something between pity and contempt. It was over the moment the board voted. You're just the last one to accept it. Watching her drive away, with the millers still visible on the lift beyond my property, I knew conventional means had failed. It was time to use the skills I'd spent a lifetime perfecting. Few people outside the film industry understand what a sound effects specialist actually does. We don't just record noises, we engineer emotional responses. The right sound, properly designed and deployed, can create fear more effectively than any visual. It's why the unseen monster is always scarier than the revealed one. For 35 years, I'd crafted sounds that made audiences worldwide grip their armrests in terror. The metallic groan of a suspension bridge about to collapse. The ominous crack of ice breaking beneath unwary feet. The chilling whine of steel cables under catastrophic tension. My home studio contained equipment most recording professionals would envy: directional microphones, multi-channel mixing boards, weatherproof speakers that could function in any environment. Tools I'd collected over decades, now repurposed for my most important production ever. The plan took shape over 3 sleepless nights. I wasn't going to damage their precious chairlift. That would be illegal and potentially dangerous. Instead, I would make people too terrified to ride it. First, I analyzed the lift's normal operating sounds, recording its signature acoustic profile from multiple positions. Then I designed a layered soundscape of subtly escalating mechanical distress sounds, the audio equivalent of watching a disaster unfold in slow motion. Using specialized directional speakers, I could create a sound corridor that would only be audible to passengers directly overhead, completely inaudible from the ground or loading stations. My decades of experience creating sounds for theater surround systems made this precision targeting possible. The system would include low-level metal fatigue sounds, the subtle creaking and popping that precedes structural failure, layered beneath the lift's normal operating noise. Progressive bearing failure effects, beginning with barely perceptible grinding that would intensify as chairs passed directly overhead. Cable stress audio, the distinctive high-pitched whine of steel under dangerous tension, synchronized with natural wind gusts using weather sensors installed on my roof. Subaudible frequencies, sounds below human hearing threshold that nonetheless create physical sensations of instability and unease. The entire system would be randomized, never creating exactly the same pattern twice, making it impossible to identify as artificial. It would activate only during peak usage times and adverse weather conditions, when fears would be most credible. Most importantly, it would be completely undetectable. Without specialized audio equipment, no one could prove these sounds weren't coming from the lift itself. I tested a prototype by riding the lift myself after hours, having Sarah trigger various sequences. Even knowing what was coming, the experience left me white-knuckled. It wasn't just convincing, it was viscerally terrifying. The chairlift's grand opening arrived with considerable fanfare. Diane had arranged for local dignitaries, complimentary refreshments, and a photographer from the regional tourism magazine. Residents gathered at the base station, many excited about the luxury amenity that would supposedly enhance their property values. I watched from my deck as the first chairs loaded with eager riders. My system remained dormant during the initial passes, allowing them to experience the normal ride. It was only when chairs began their third rotation, when enthusiasm was at its peak, that I activated the first subtle sequence. The results exceeded my expectations. Midway across my property, the first affected riders visibly stiffened. Conversations stopped. Grips tightened on safety bars. One woman pointed urgently at the support tower, saying something to her husband that made him look up with alarm. By the fourth rotation, the first panicked riders arrived at the upper station, demanding to speak with operators about dangerous noises and vibrations they'd experienced. Maintenance personnel were dispatched to inspect the section above my property, finding nothing amiss. The fifth rotation brought the moment I'd been waiting for. A former structural engineer from Denver, visiting his son's family, activated the emergency stop after hearing what he described as catastrophic bearing failure sounds. The abrupt halt left 27 passengers suspended, requiring an evacuation that took over 2 hours. Diane was livid, personally marching from chair to chair during the evacuation, assuring everyone the system was perfectly safe, despite engineers finding no explanation for the reported sounds. When she spotted me watching from my deck, her expression could have melted steel. The following day, after extensive overnight inspections found no mechanical issues, the lift reopened. But word had spread. Ridership dropped by half. Those who did ride appeared tense, especially when passing over my section of the route. I continued deploying different sound sequences randomly, ensuring no pattern could be detected. Sometimes the lift would operate normally for hours before a particularly unnerving combination would send another passenger reaching for the emergency phone. Social media accelerated the effect. A teenage visitor posted a TikTok video of her terrified reaction to a cracking sound overhead, garnering over 100,000 views in 48 hours. Forums for skiing enthusiasts began featuring warnings about the dangerous section of the Pine Ridge Chairlift. Within 2 weeks, ridership had plummeted by 70%. Emergency maintenance checks, each requiring complete shutdown and thorough inspection, became almost daily occurrences. The lift was developing a reputation as the haunted chairlift of Pine Ridge, with theories ranging from wind anomalies to actual structural defects. Diane's response was predictable. She hired an engineering firm specializing in lift technology to conduct a comprehensive assessment. For 3 days, they tested every component, replaced bearings and cables as precautionary measures, and installed vibration sensors throughout the system. They found nothing wrong. Next came the audio engineers, brought in to determine if some peculiar acoustic phenomenon might be occurring. They recorded ambient sound along the entire route, analyzed frequency patterns, and tested for unusual wind effects or structure-borne resonance. They found nothing unusual. Security patrols were established to watch for vandalism or tampering. Cameras were installed on lift towers. A guard booth was placed at the edge of my property line, staffed during operating hours. None of these measures detected my system, which operated through precisely calibrated directional audio that disappeared the moment you moved away from the targeted area. The weatherproof speakers, disguised within landscape features around my property, were visually undetectable. The financial impact mounted quickly. The HOA had projected significant revenue from day passes sold to non-residents, all of which evaporated as the lift's reputation spread. Maintenance costs soared with each emergency inspection. Insurance premiums tripled after the carrier classified the lift as high risk, based on incident reports. Diane grew increasingly desperate. She organized community confidence rides, where board members demonstrated the lift's safety, only to have one such event end with the treasurer's wife in tears after experiencing what she described as terrifying noises directly above my property. The confrontation I'd been expecting came on a Sunday morning. I was enjoying coffee on my deck when Diane marched onto my property, accompanied by 2 board members and a man she introduced as an acoustic specialist. "We know what you're doing," she announced without preamble. Your background in sound effects isn't exactly a secret, Peterson. I maintained an expression of polite confusion. I'm not sure what you're implying. People only hear these mysterious sounds when they're passing over your property, she said. Coincidence? I think not. The acoustic specialist surveyed my deck. We'd like permission to set up monitoring equipment on your property. Do you have a warrant? I asked mildly. This isn't a criminal investigation, Diane snapped. Yet. Then you're trespassing, I replied. Unless you'd like to discuss rerouting the lift to restore my privacy? Her face flushed with anger. This is malicious interference with community property. We could sue you for damages. You'd need evidence for that, I reminded her. And since there's nothing wrong with your lift, as your own experts have confirmed, what exactly would you be suing me for? The acoustic specialist looked uncomfortable. Without concrete evidence of artificial sound generation, we can't make any definitive claims. Diane wasn't ready to retreat. This childish sabotage won't change anything. The lift stays exactly where it is. Then I guess you'll continue having problems, I said with a shrug. Mechanical issues can be so persistent, almost like karma for running roughshod over people's lives. After they left, I adjusted my system to operate less frequently but with more disturbing sound combinations. Quality over quantity. The lift could run normally for days, lulling them into false security, before delivering an experience so unsettling that riders would never fully trust it again. The financial strain began showing in other ways. The HOA announced a special assessment to cover mounting costs, positioning it as unexpected maintenance requirements, rather than admitting the lift was becoming a liability. Homeowners, already skeptical after watching the repeated shutdowns, revolted against the additional fees. At the emergency assessment meeting, the community hall was packed. Diane attempted to maintain control, but homeowners demanded explanations for the escalating costs. The chairlift was supposed to increase our property values, one vacation homeowner argued. Instead, we're becoming known as the community with the dangerous lift. My rental bookings have dropped 30%. Tom Andrews, my retired judge neighbor, stood to address the board. I've reviewed our financial reports. We've spent $127,000 on unbudgeted maintenance and engineering consultations in just 6 weeks. This project was approved without proper diligence or transparency. The crowd murmured agreement. Tom continued, I move that we suspend lift operations pending a complete financial and safety review by an independent third party. Diane banged her gavel. Motion out of order. The operational decisions remain with the board. Another homeowner stood. Then perhaps we need a new board. I call for a vote of no confidence. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Diane eventually adjourned without resolution, but the damage was done. The community had split into factions, those who still supported the development vision versus those concerned about financial mismanagement and safety. What followed was an unexpected alliance. Tom invited several homeowners, including me, to a private meeting at his home. There, he revealed what his legal background had helped him discover. The Chairlift project had bypassed several required regulatory approvals through Diane's connections. The environmental impact statement was rubber-stamped without proper review, he explained. The safety certifications were expedited by her brother's office. And most importantly, the board violated our own bylaws by not requiring a community-wide vote for capital expenditures exceeding $250,000. Together, this group filed formal complaints with state regulatory agencies and requested a forensic audit of the HOA finances. The pressure from multiple official investigations finally forced the county commissioner's office to act, suspending the lift's operating permit pending a comprehensive safety review. The suspension couldn't have come at a worse time for Diane, the height of ski season, when the lift was meant to showcase Pine Ridge as a winter destination. With regulatory investigators combing through documentation and inspectors repeatedly failing to identify any mechanical cause for the reported issues, her position became untenable. The forensic audit revealed further problems, cost overruns concealed from the community, no-bid contracts awarded to companies with connections to board members, and reserve funds inappropriately diverted to cover mounting expenses. At the February board meeting, Homeowners packed the hall again, this time armed with audit results and regulatory findings. Diane attempted to maintain control, but the tide had turned decisively. The Chairlift project has cost this community over $1.2 million, Tom announced, nearly double the approved budget. It's currently generating zero revenue while continuing to drain our reserves through maintenance and legal expenses. A motion to remove the current board passed by overwhelming majority. Tom was elected interim president, with a mandate to resolve the Chairlift crisis and restore financial stability. His first official action was to approach me privately. "We know what you did," he said without preamble. "No one can prove it, but we know." I neither confirmed nor denied anything. "The new board is considering options for the lift," he continued. "Rerouting it away from residential properties would cost another $400,000 we don't have. Removing it entirely would mean writing off over $1 million in sunk costs." "Difficult situation," I observed neutrally. "We need a solution where the lift becomes usable again," Tom said carefully. "If these acoustic anomalies were to permanently cease, we could recoup some of our investment and eventually fund a modified route that respects privacy concerns." I understood the implied offer. "I've always supported responsible community development," I replied, "with proper setbacks from residential properties." 2 days later, the board announced a phased renovation plan. Phase 1 would modify the existing lift to address community concerns, creating a bypass around residential properties. Construction would begin after the spring thaw, with completion before the next ski season. Remarkably, the mysterious sounds plaguing the chairlift stopped completely. Maintenance testing reported no unusual acoustic phenomena. The lift operated normally for the remainder of the season, though ridership remained well below projections. By the following winter, Pine Ridge had transformed. The chairlift now followed a scenic route that enhanced the community's appeal without invading anyone's privacy. The bypass curved respectfully around residential areas, maintaining a minimum 200-foot distance from any structure. Diane and her allies had sold their properties and departed, replaced by homeowners who embraced the community's new transparency and respect for individual rights. The HOA adopted amended bylaws requiring supermajority approval for any major development affecting residential properties. Sarah's garden flourished again. My workshop became a gathering place where I taught younger residents about traditional craftsmanship. Our home was once again the sanctuary we'd worked a lifetime to create. At the winter solstice celebration, Tom raised a toast to community resilience and the power of standing firm for what's right. His eyes met mine briefly across the room, the unspoken acknowledgement of how we'd reclaimed our neighborhood. The haunted chairlift became local legend, with new residents hearing exaggerated versions involving actual ghosts or supernatural forces. I never confirmed nor denied my role, simply smiling enigmatically when the topic arose. Sometimes, standing on my deck, watching the distant chairlift carrying skiers along its new route, I reflect on what it took to protect our home. It wasn't just about privacy or property rights. It was about refusing to be sacrificed for someone else's vision, about using a lifetime of specialized knowledge to stand against those who thought their power made them untouchable. The only remnant of my audio system is a single weatherproof speaker, concealed beneath a decorative boulder near my property line. I've never had to use it again, but I sleep better knowing it's there, just in case. Because as my father always said, trust is good, but preparation is better.